This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. Well, we had a terrific guest last week. Warren Weeks is just a terrific guy. I hope you got a chance to listen to that podcast. And we've got another terrific guest on this week that I don't want to waste any time in the upfront mumbo jumbo stuff that I normally talk about. So let's just get right into our conversation. Scott Kaminski is a corporate marketing, communications, and public relations pro based in North Carolina. His long career in communications started with the U.S. Navy, where he wrote press releases and oversaw communications for the USS Bella Wood, including its historic port visit to Russia. His specialties include mass marketing, advertising, campaign development and strategy, social media and web, internal communications, meeting events, community. It sounds like a real PR guy, right? And they're all on regular display with his entertaining presence on Twitter. And this is where he and I met. He is a super terrific guy. Scott, welcome to the PR Podcast.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. I can't believe I'm following Warren. He's one of my favorite people to follow on Twitter.
He's a terrific guy. I mean, he's a guy that inspires me. And that's really why I started this show, right? Is to not talk about, me and what I do, but to showcase all the people who I know and I meet in my regular comings and goings, whether those are, reporters and editors on the news side or PR people in communications like you and me on this side. But you and I first became acquainted on Twitter.
Yes,
and you really have a distinctive voice on Twitter, someone whose posts I really look forward to. How do you approach your personality on Twitter and how have you developed that over the years?
Twitter is interesting because, I will say that my history with Twitter, I think everybody comes to different social media channels in different ways. And initially, I originally came to Twitter, totally planning to just lurk. Okay, I'll follow a few people. And then at one point, I actually had, I'll say, kind of a professional Twitter account, which is the Twitter account that we correspond on and stuff like that. And then I had almost kind of a non-professional Twitter account. And then at one point, I basically just dissolved the one and said, why am I doing this? Why am I having these two properties that I'm trying to manage? Especially because, as you listed, I personally have enough going on in my professional life. I don't even know why I was trying to make my personal life that much more complicated, or my social media life. So I basically, just kind of, I will say, merged those two things. But as far as a voice, I've certainly tried a lot of things on Twitter and on social media. And I think a lot of people have, and I think a lot of people kind of have this idea, but ultimately, it's just kind of, it's comments. It's trying to not necessarily be a peanut gallery or something like that, but I think trying to be able to put your spin on what's going on in the world, and that could be news, that could be communications, that could be, what is the latest thing that happens to be trending. So, I think some people have a bad idea of Twitter, but I've gotten so much out of it. I've met so many incredible people, and I've just, it's so much fun. It really, really is. The personalities and everything that just drives that. It's really been a joy, and it's also been professionally rewarding in some ways as well. It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it is absolutely fun for me as well. Also, as you said, really professionally rewarding. Twitter has always reminded me of the old AP Newswire, sitting in the corner of the newsroom, right? At least it used to back when it was linear. It's kind of going back to linear, but it's still a little different. I would still love to see that sort of minute to minute style feed, because I remember in my days working in the radio newsrooms, and you've got the dot matrix printers over in the corner, and they're just spitting out the AP wire copy, right, and all that stuff. And so that's what originally attracted me to Twitter. And then just as you said, all the personalities and the people you meet or you read and you get to know and, you develop relationships with, really terrifically rewarding. But also, and I want to hear you chime in on this, in the last couple of days, read yet another news story about how Twitter is the preferred social media platform for journalists. And I'm interested in how you have used Twitter to maybe connect with journalists or communicate with journalists over the years, and maybe even how that's changed.
Sure. I mean, first of all, I mean, I think it makes sense that, it makes so much sense when you kind of boil it down as to why it's the preferred method for journalists. Because number one, it's not necessarily, and I'm not saying that Instagram and Facebook and all of the other are kind of shiny objects, but there's so much more that's into those platforms, whether it's, trying to impress somebody with a video or trying to impress somebody with an image and stuff like that. And that's also, I think one of the things that I love about Twitter is, even though when the character count went from 140 to 280, and a whole bunch of people thought that the sky was falling and the world as they knew it on Twitter was kind of ending, there was still so much, there was, and there still is so much concision. You have to be so concise to be able to get your point across in a tweet. Yes, you've still got maybe some photos or some other media and things like that you're adding to it, but you still need to know how to write and know how to get your point across. And I think that's why journalists bond to it, and I think that's why they're so close to it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, sort of like the multitude of perspectives that are on Twitter are also terrific. And as a PR guy, and I'm sure you probably agree, even though we might have our personal political biases or perceptions or beliefs, what have you, I still want to hear from everybody else who I even disagree with, because you got to know what those outlets, and I'm talking personal on a professional level here, you got to know what all those different outlets are talking about. You've got to understand their voices, and Twitter is a great place to get all that from.
And the thing is, that is quite honestly, the joy of it is being able to kind of see people's mindset and stuff like that. And I do also want to go back and answer your original question, because as far as, interacting with journalists, I have had journalists who, number one, I mean, I have my company's name in my Twitter bio. So I have had journalists who have reached out to me based off of that. The company that I work for, Hayfala, is primarily a B2B brand. So a lot of the journalists who I deal with are more of, I will say, the industry side. They're not necessarily so much on the consumer side, but it really is. I mean, Twitter is such an amazing medium to be able to connect with those journalists, and then also end up being a resource later on for being able to talk about the trends in the industry and all of these things that not only do I represent, but also my company represents for, all of the types of products that we sell, which is everything. And I believe me, I won't give you a sales pitch, but it's kitchen organization and closet organization and LED lighting and all of these things. And these are the types of stories that journalists are trying to write about. And it ends up, because of my presence on Twitter, number one, I mean, I hope to be able to come across as somebody who's engaging and well informed, but people know that I can be the resource for those particular things based off of my connection to the company.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your company there. They're kind of the company that you don't know that you know. In the way you described it to me before we got on here. Did you want to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, Hateful is interesting because this is a company that, I mean, one of the ways that I kind of joke about what this company does is, we almost find solutions for problems that people didn't even know that they had. because there's all of these amazing things. And, if anybody's ever watched HGTV and they're like, you see something cool and you're like, where did you guys get that? Typically, it's a company like Hayflow. There are some other companies that compete with us in the space, but it's all of these amazing products that add motion and add functionality to living spaces and offices and things like that. And then it's also sometimes more pedestrian things, like we sell stuff because we deal with a lot of wood shops. We sell everything from moving blankets to sanding paper, and then little connectors and stuff like that to be able for people to put all of these projects together. But it's things that people interact with every day, but it's components. So it's pieces of larger projects in some ways. So for me as a PR person, I have so many really, really fun stories to tell. And that's one of the cool things, and it's so challenging because everything that we talk about, for the most part, either people don't necessarily always think or know that it's there, or in some ways it's just living behind a closed door until you open the door and then realize what it actually is. So it really is a lot of fun. And having a catalog with 30,000 products, and then other stuff that's happening in our parent offices in Germany and stuff like that, it's something interesting because, I guess nobody ever dreams about, hey, I want to go into marketing and PR for a B2B hardware company. Nobody has ever said that, on the face of the planet. But it really is and can be a lot of fun.
That's great. That it's great to hear someone really enjoying their job, right, and really digging what they do every day. I mean, that's what I have, and I'm very lucky to have found that after a 20-year career in PR.
Believe me, I've been in worse situations, and I get it, and I sympathize, and yeah, we can have a Twitter conversation about that later.
That's great. Let's roll back the clock on your career here and talk about where you started out, right? With a terrific assignment at the Navy. How do you get into the Navy, and then how do you get into communications for the Navy?
So being a journalist in the Navy is kind of interesting. First of all, there aren't very many of them. But I mean, first of all, the way that I got into it was simply signing on the dotted line, and then working with a recruiter. And when I first went to join the Navy, they didn't actually have a slot available for a journalist. But I was thankful and lucky enough, because this really did probably change the trajectory of my entire career. I was lucky enough to be able to have a recruiter who was looking out for me. And he took somebody else, so another recruit, down to be processed. And it's kind of this luck of the draw thing where some of the jobs that were available for this particular person came up. And one of the jobs happened to be journalist, because when I signed up to be what they call a seaman apprentice. And that is basically, I essentially would have been the guy who was, pulling on, lines to get the ship into port, and, painting the ship and stuff like that. Very important. Definitely not what I've wanted to do. I have all the respect in the world for everybody who was doing that job. So I had a recruiter who had this other recruit, and they said, okay, you can be a journalist. And the guy went, I don't want to be a journalist. Why do I want to do that? And the recruiter said, you know what, hold on to that spot. I have somebody who wants to do it. I had to go down and take a typing test, bizarrely enough. And you had to type 20 words per minute. I typed 19 and a half.
No.
And I looked like somebody had just shot my puppy right in front of me. And the woman who was administering the typing test said, you're going to practice typing this summer, aren't you? And I said, yes. Oh my goodness. Yes, absolutely. And she said, okay, the slot's yours. So that set me off, and that set me into this journalism career. So the military trained me. I went through 3 months of print journalism training. So that was writing feature articles, that was still photography. And then I went through 3 months of broadcast training. So that was everything from being a radio announcer, being a radio DJ, being a TV news anchor, going out and and actually filming and doing all of the actual stuff that I need to do to put together a story, edit a story, everything. So, and then I got stationed on a little island in the middle of the Indian Ocean that nobody's almost ever been to or heard of, and called Diego Garcia. And I had the easiest job in the Navy. I was a radio DJ, a TV news anchor, and hosted a video music show. And it's incredible on a tropical island, which, if you look it up, it's probably the most amazing and most beautiful place I will ever live. So
that's it. That's incredible. But it's so interesting that they trained you to do all those jobs in the span of just a few months, really, before they set you on your assignment.
Their training at the time when I went through it was 6 months. But again, I mean, the whole purpose of this, I mean, certainly there's on the job training after that. But the whole goal of being a journalist in the military, it's about command information. And it's the same thing I deal with now. It's just at a different scope, a different scale. And it is basic, it's storytelling. That's all it really is. And it's the different type of stories. It's having an eye for those stories and trying to be able to tell them in an engaging way. And it just happens to be that your audience wears a uniform, or their workplace happens to be very large and gray and floats in the ocean.
So give me some analogies or maybe some similarities between, your training in the U.S. Navy, what you did there, and how you do your job today. There've got to be some similarities in terms of, and you started to allude to them, in terms of how you tell the story, but also how you create the story, how you manufacture, or grab the parts and pieces that you need to put together the story that you want to tell. How do you go about that? And how did your Navy training help you?
I mean, again, training in the Navy is, first of all, it's great because there's, you've already got your audience defined in a very, very kind of very strategic way. So, whether that is to, a particular base that you happen to be on, where if you're doing a print publication, that's where your publication is being distributed to. Could be strictly military members. In many instances, it's military members and their family. So it's not just, you have to consider all of those audiences with everything that you're doing. And then if you're talking about broadcast, in some instances it is a geographic area, but if you're talking about signals, as I said, I was a radio DJ on Diego Garcia, which is right smack in the middle of the Indian Ocean. I would occasionally get fan mail from people who were listening to my show on an AM signal in South Africa. So but still, the purpose is the same. It's to entertain, it's to inform, and the building blocks of everything that I learned and everything that I picked up in the Navy and kind of moved forward with all of my other jobs, it is exactly the same. And that's the thing that I love about this career is the fundamentals are not going to change. No matter what role you're in, it really is just the scale and the scope and maybe sometimes the budget that you have to play with to be able to tell those stories.
So how do you develop the philosophy you have about communications that yields the piece that you wrote a few years ago about, jokes aside, the very serious business of adding humor to your marketing mix? How do you get there?
Well, some of that, certainly a lot of that is just based off of, I will say, having this experience of throwing things up against the wall and then realizing that they're not sticking. Because, you've got some organizations that really do say, okay, this is what our brand voice is. And then, you read it and you kind of dig into it and it's very dry. It's not, it's not personable at all. It's just very, very straightforward and it's almost kind of like, reading Strunk and White, it's the guide as opposed to everything else that could be added there. And the reason I kind of came up with that philosophy, or that thinking, is I just kind of came to a realization one day, and that was very simple. It was no, in most instances, because my career outside of the military, every company that I've worked for has been a sales organization in some way. But I think some of this could be applicable to charity or nonprofit work and things like that. But the simple fact and the simple philosophy was nobody ever wants to be sold to, but everybody wants to be entertained in some way. And the thing is, that's how people remember you. That's how they remember your company. And that's how they remember the thing that you're trying to tell or engage them with or get across to them. And so, I mean, obviously this idea, it can't be for everything. There's going to be crisis communications and things like that. And you're not going to be, the guy in clown makeup with a seltzer bottle talking about that particular story. I get that. But the things where you can be a little bit light and kind of bring a little bit more of a personality to what you're putting out to people, not only will your general audience at large appreciate that, but journalists will appreciate that. Because again, there's so much that is hitting their inbox, whether that is their traditional email inbox, or in some instances their Twitter direct message box. They're getting so much and they're getting bombarded with so much. This is also another way and another tactic to be able to kind of break through and kind of rise above everything else that everybody's doing. So, again, as I've said, it's using humor like this and in this way may not be a fit for everybody. And in some industries and some things that you're trying to convey, it absolutely isn't. So really, ultimately, you still need to kind of read the room, which PR professionals should really be. That's never on a job description, but that is absolutely 100% part of your job. Whether we are talking about kind of the atmosphere in general for getting your message out there, or when you are in an actual physical room and trying to figure out, what the best way is to proceed with something.
Yeah, I sometimes describe the job that we do, whether it's, and usually when we're talking about media relations and dealing with reporters, it's also the art of taking care of the reporter just as much as you're taking care of the client, right? And making sure that you are addressing the needs of the reporter to help them write the story that you want them to write, while you're also representing and carrying the client message and making sure that story gets communicated properly. But when that reporter goes, I need this thing, or can you help me talk to this type of a person, or what, and it's our job to help facilitate that. And to, as you said, read the room and use a little bit of humor and lightheartedness as you go through that, because, reporters are dealing with all manner of people screaming at them in the newsroom, and the editor wants to know where the piece is, and the photo desk wants to know how the hell am I going to get that image and everything else. So helping that the reporter navigate that territory, I think, is really important.
And that's the thing. This is just as much a customer service function as it is almost anything else. And that's one of the, it's not a requirement, but that's when I interview for people to work in communications, and especially maybe younger people, I ask them if they have experience dealing with the public, whether that is working in a restaurant or working in restaurant or retail or something like that, dealing with the general public and being able to serve them and serve their needs has so much of an incredible value in working in this industry. It really is kind of one of the unwritten things, which it should almost be, the kind of table stakes for people for working in PR, because you learn so much about dealing with people's different personalities, people's different egos, catering to specific needs, because all you're really doing is you're catering a specific message or catering that experience to that particular person. And you have to do that with reporters all the time. So just having that experience and it may sound bizarre, but it really does truly prepare you for being able to deal with reporters. Because the other part of it too, just like in retail and just like in restaurants, if you were doing well, and if you were doing essentially what is almost kind of the baseline, yeah, you asked for this is what your deadline is, and I'm going to get it to you by that deadline. Or if you get it to them before, I can guarantee you that they've asked somebody else that for that piece before, or somebody else hasn't delivered. And in some ways you are benefiting by having kind of poor competition who may be disorganized, or who may not really kind of know what the assignment is. And if you can do that and kind of take care of reporters, and especially if you can do it once, they are going to remember that, and they are going to be able to come back to you for the other things that may not just be oh, okay, I'm just getting, a picture and a 50-word write-up or something like that. I've had a whole bunch of instances like that where I've taken care of a reporter and gotten them exactly what they needed, gotten it to them, typically within 2 hours or something like that. And they've come back to me 2 months later and said, hey, I have this entire feature that I'm doing on trends in this part of the industry. Do you have I know that you have somebody who can talk about this and who can really, really give me some very good insights. And that is, taking care of the everyday stuff is what lines you up to be able to get into the larger features and the larger conversations that are happening in your industry.
Could not agree more. It happened to me just 2 days ago, that exact scenario, right? And it happens all the time because you fill a reporter's need, like you said, they remember you, you develop a reputation as being reliable. Did your Navy training help you with that too? That sort of being prepared? I don't use a Boy Scout thing, but being prepared and sort of lining up all the things behind the scenes that you need to then react effectively when that call comes?
You can use Boy Scout stuff. Unfortunately, I'm an Eagle Scout as well. So yeah, I think, I'm a huge proponent of preparation, no matter what it is. If it were going into a job interview, I'm the one who is researching absolutely everybody who I'm meeting with, and developing questions based off of their role and maybe something that I've seen in their experience that kind of hits right. So no, preparation is absolutely key. And the thing is, everybody can kind of develop their own system based off of that and kind of based off of their experience. But yeah, I think the Navy certainly gave me so much insight into being able to see, number one, what preparation looks like, because you've got training, you've got, there's so much repetition to be able to make something, to turn something into muscle memory, but then also being able to see the things that you need to learn and the things that you need to kind of keep your eye on to be able to advance in that organization as well. Certainly kind of, it was something that I definitely paid attention to, and it was something that I was trying to be attuned to in basically every role and every kind of opportunity that they threw at me.
All right, well, we're going to end it there with be prepared, and we'll do the Eagle Scout, Boy Scout, Navy PR person, wrap it all up in a bow thing.
Well, we can have, that's going to be a heck of a t-shirt to put that all on a t-shirt. But.
Well, the front and the back, the front and the back.
Okay. All right.
Very good. We're in. All right. Well, Scott, this has been great. We're going to segue now into the rapid fire question portion of our podcast. This is where we take a page from inside the actor's studio. I'm probably dating myself with that reference at this point.
I'm all on board for that.
You're there. You're totally, there with me, totally right?
So, where are your cards? You need your blue cards.
I need my blue cards. Next time I'll bring the James Lipton blue cards. Yes. But we're going to hit you with some rapid fire questions here. It needs no explanation. So here we go. Rapid fire question number one. What is your favorite news source?
It has to be Twitter. I just, it's curated. And as I said before, it's concise and it gets me to the point. As long as you follow the right people, then you're going to get the right information out of it.
I think our last 4 guests have said Twitter, so I may have to rejigger these questions because rapid fire question number 2 is, what is your favorite social media platform?
Yeah, as much as I struggle to say something different, it is definitely Twitter again, but I will give the provision that you get so much more out of it when you put a lot into it. So using the social aspect of it and actually connecting and having conversations with people, that is the most important part of Twitter for me. Because that's really where I get the actual thrill and the enjoyment out of it, is meeting new people, learning all of these different experiences, and then just kind of moving things on from there.
Couldn't agree more. Rapid fire question number 3, coffee or alcohol?
So alcohol is good, but coffee is what gets the job done.
The gas in the tank. I hear you. Rapid fire question number 4, what is your favorite on the run food?
I'm gonna have to go with a very boring, like salted almonds. As much as I try and grab sometimes for a candy bar or something like that, probably just a couple of, I'm sure it's probably more than the recommended serving, but kind of a handful of almonds is what I try and run with.
I want to meet the person who does those recommended serving sizes, because they seem to run from 2 almonds to the whole loaf of bread or whatever.
Well, yeah, the family size bag of whatever I just take as a challenge.
There you go.
So yeah.
I love it. Rapid fire question number 5, rounding it out. What do you want to be after you finish this career?
I think I want to be a mentor of some sort. I mean, that is something which, the company where I work, we have a student employee program. So children of employees who are college students come here to work. A lot of them do come through in communications. And I always, number one, I try and talk with them. And number 2, I always recommend that they connect with me on LinkedIn, because I'm always looking to try and I'm always happy to leverage the connections that I have. And believe me, I don't have any grand scheme or grand connections or anything like that. But I always love to be able to help people, and especially younger people, to be able to kind of start their career, move forward in their career, look at their resumes and kind of help them out wherever I can. So I think being a mentor in some way would definitely, that's where I would find the most enjoyment post PR career.
That is a great answer. I think that we are all products of our mentors, the good and the bad.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And I've had some amazing ones. I'm sure you have too.
I have. Yes.
That's great. Well, Scott, this has been a great conversation. Thanks for spending time with us. Please let people know how they can find you and your company online.
Website is hafele.com, which is HAFELE.com, especially since not many people always mispronounce it. It took me 2 days of watching YouTube videos to learn how to interview for the job. Email is essentially what my Twitter handle is, which is Marcom Scott, MARCOMM, and then my last name, SCOTT. So marcomscott@gmail.com, and then twitter.com/marcomscott. Thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, this has been terrific, Scott. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram @The PR Podcast, and send us a question or comment. We are also on the TikToks, so check us out on TikTok as well. Our intro is by Christopher Appold. You can find him and his fantastic photography on Instagram @Christopher_APPOLDT. Check him out there and hire him for all your photography needs. You can find me online @Jody Fisher on all the socials, including the TikToks, and on the web @jodyfisherpr.com. We'll see you next time on the PR Podcast.